Hello and welcome to the Mindset Mentor on Sauga 960 AM. I'm your host, Tania Kolar. Today, you're going to hear a remarkable story of one woman's journey of deep grief, overcoming deep grief, and finding purpose and meaning in the tragic death of her son, Kieran. Kieran passed away at the age of 23 due to an accidental overdose, and she struggled with his mental health issues for many years before that. And, we're at a beautiful point where they overcame many of his challenges and, entering that space of hope. That hope was taken away on that unfortunate day. And she has now been able to turn deep, tragic pain into a beautiful story and meaning and purpose. She was able to start a nonprofit organization to help others overcome deep pain that she has experienced. But also beyond that, she was able to track down her son. Her son had donated his heart, and she was able to track down the recipient who received his heart. And it's such a remarkable story and a journey. And now this, incredible connection. You're going to hear about all the details from this remarkable woman who has so bravely and courageously shared her story to help other people. And I think it's so important because, through our challenges, we can really rise above it and come to a new place. Obviously, experiencing the death of a child is not something that you're going to get over. It is certainly not anything that, you're going to sweep under the rug and pretend it didn't happen. That deep grief and that deep pain certainly always exists, but she was able to take it to another level and really honor and find the meaning in such tragedy. And you're going to hear about that story. So I want to say hello and welcome to Sharon Vandrish. It is such a pleasure to have you here, Sharon. And I really want to acknowledge and honor you for being here and being so open and vulnerable and sharing your personal story.
Thank you so much for having me here and giving me the opportunity to share it, because I think it's a message that needs to get out there and to give hope for others who think that maybe such a tragedy is a pit of grief that you couldn't possibly climb out of.
Yeah, I think many people would say exactly that how do you ever overcome the death of a child? How do you get past that? But there is a way to find joy, to have hope again, to have happiness in some capacity at least. And obviously it's a process that doesn't happen overnight. And I would love for you, Sharon, to take us back in time so we can understand Kieran's world and what he was going through and what led to the accidental overdose.
Oh, gee. Okay. Kieran was identified. Well, actually, we noticed something was off with Kieran as early as the age of 4. So we noticed that his behavior he was in a Montessori school, and we noticed that he was lashing out for no reason at a very, very early age and getting calls about just aggression that was really undescribed, like as in there was no real valid reason for his aggression. And so very, very early, we noticed some signs to his behavior. And I've learned very quickly that children with mental illness, they don't have the ability to describe, I have anxiety, I have depression, I have feelings that I can't control. And in children, it might manifest as behavior, but we don't know that. And therefore, children with behavior often are labeled bad because they can't express their feelings very well. So it started at 4, and by the age of 6, I thought, this is not, I have an older son, and I hate to use the word normal, but I have an older son who wasn't exhibiting any behavior anywhere close, remotely close. So I did have him assessed privately, because the school system, you get on a list, and if they're going to do it, it's going to take you forever. So I did go to the Artemis Assessment Center, which has a psycho and an educational component. So you can have a psychological assessment and an educational assessment. So at that time, he was identified with ADHD and some anxiety disorders and a variety of different elements, including some educational elements. And he was identified right away and given an IEP. And the benefit to that is then the school is required to provide assistance for him immediately, which is great because then it gives the parent it gave me some relief, because I thought, you always think it's you. You always think there's something that you're doing wrong. And the school is very, very quick to blame the parent and the parenting. So at least that way I was able to have assistance. So, but this, we're already in grade 1. And for a child to have an issue at grade 1 is very disturbing for us as a parent, certainly as a school. He was removed from a regular school program in grade 1, expelled. Like, what do you do with a child who's expelled from a Montessori school in grade 1? Mm-hmm. So we went into the public school system, but in looking back on that, that was actually a blessing, because a private school can't accommodate a special needs child, and a public school has to. So he was put in what they call a contained classroom from grade 2 to 4, where there was only 8 students. And then they had a teacher and a child and youth worker. So they had 2 teachers for 8 kids. And that's where he had a lot of challenges, but he also had a lot of successes. So he actually started to feel confident about managing his behavior in a controlled environment. And by the end of grade 4, he graduated out of that program and was a success. So then we go grade 5, grade 6, doing well. And then puberty hit. But all through that time, he had all kinds of medication, which I have to wonder now what we did, because that's what we do. We medicate. We don't try to manage the child. We manage the environment, and we don't look at, what could be possibly going on here. We don't treat the child. Really, we don't really treat the child.
But I think, the quick response is that you want to get the quickest help that you can. And so people are, looking to medications to try to help to control the behavior. And so I think a lot of parents are left in that space of, at this point, I want to try anything and everything. And so really, I mean, it's you just never know. I think every case is so individual. And so it's normal to always have that question of, have I done the right thing? Is this the right choice? Is medication the right option? But it's really a process of trial and error. And you don't really know until many years later if that was even the right decision.
It is, but looking back, there are certain medications, like they put him on Paxil, and Paxil can cause anyone to be suicidral. So there are certain medications that we shouldn't have given to a child, but you don't know, you trust everyone. Mm-hmm. So grade 6, grade 7, and then also the influence of teachers. Certain teachers thought he was so charming and so wonderful. And those teachers he had great success with. And then you switch in an administrator who doesn't have the same attitude, and all of a sudden Kieran's, a devil, and Kieran's being sent home again. And Kieran is, grade 8, 7, he started to exhibit signs that weren't, showing, positive outcome. And by grade 8, he had interactions with certain administrators, like administrator locked him in a classroom and sat in front of the door with a chair and wouldn't let him leave. And that contained him to the point where when the administrator finally opened the door, he pushed past him, and that administrator called the police and said that he was assaulting him. So we got into the situation where Kieran was in a really bad place, and the options were have him arrested or put him in a locked mental health facility, which I did do in grade 8 for a month. The blessing in that is he was then diagnosed with another, with conduct disorder. This is when he was 13, which is a very, very severe behavioral disorder. So we had ADHD, then we had ODD, oppositional defiant disorder, at the age of 9, and then 13 was conduct. So in getting that diagnosis, I did a lot of research. It provided us additional resources, Peel Children's Center, Nexus Youth Services, all of the services out there. I was able to get multi-systemic therapy into his life, which was a very intense program of 4 months, where we had a child and youth worker that came into my life 20 hours a week to help give me respite. Mm-hmm. So I was able to go out. And actually have a break, which is really important when you have a very difficult challenge with a child. I was able to have an incredible relationship with this man who actually stayed in my son's life until he was 23 and actually delivered the eulogy at my son's funeral. My son having a positive male role model in his life, because my ex-husband and I are separated, made a difference. And that's when we started to actually see a change in Kieran's behavior, funnily enough. And people say you don't realize the impact of separated families on the child, especially on the male child in a broken home, until you start to have that positive influence again. So, and through that with Peel Children's Center, who I have nothing but amazing things to say, and I encourage everyone to donate to them. I mean, I know there's another story that comes back to last November when we get there, but Kieran started to slowly turn around, and he started to take accountability around the age of 15. He started going to his own cognitive behavioral therapy once a week, and he did not stop going by himself every week to a wonderful man there named Andrew Blackwood, who actually has his own business as well. Mm-hmm. And Kieran would start saying things like, I don't want to be this way. And I can't think of any person with mental illness that actually wants to be mentally ill. So when you attack that mentally ill person and say, you know, go take your pills and you're and you're such a, like, that is not, that's suppressing them. That is actually making things worse. They don't want to be that way. They do not want to have the demons that they're fighting with. You know, he would wake up in the middle of the night with this anxiety, this racing heart. No one wants to have that. No one wants to feel depressed. No one wants to have that anxiety. So he wanted to go. And between 15 and 18, every week I drove him. They have to be participant. They have to be there and present and want to change. And that's when we started to see the shift. And he started saying, you know, I don't want to be that person who always gets suspended, who always gets, you know. So in grade 9, again, the school board pushed him into a contained classroom. It's called a Section 23 class. Mm-hmm. Section 23 class is, let's put all the poorly behaved kids in the entire board into one classroom and expect them to exhibit good behavior. Yeah, what do you think the chances of that being successful, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's not giving them the support that they need. And the problem is, I think that with mental illness, and of course, it's such a broad spectrum. I mean, there's so many variations of what mental illness looks like, but it's so deeply misunderstood.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Nobody knows how to deal with it. So you are, you know, put in situations where exactly, here's isolation, let's put them away separately and let them figure it out, because they should be able to get over it. I mean, there's a chemical imbalance in the brain that's it's not equated to poor parenting or lack of discipline or too much discipline, you know, and people just don't have that understanding if they haven't experienced it, been through it, or know somebody who has been through it. And so that's why it's so important to have these conversations to help to, you know, bring that awareness and to take away the stigma around mental health issues and concerns, and really give people the help that they need. And that help extends beyond the person who is suffering with mental illness. It's their families, it's their caregivers, it's everybody around them, and society at large as well. I mean, it's so important to know and what we can do and help ease people in those situations, because I can imagine, Sharon, so devastating to, first of all, witness your son going through all of this, but also I think, you know, that must be such a challenge to hit a wall, you know, of thinking, you know, here's the potential help that I'm going to get from the school or from whoever, whatever organization, and then you just kind of are met with a wall, and they can't really provide the necessary help because, again, the understanding is unfortunately just not there.
Yeah, I think what ends up perpetuating the problem is your thoughts become your reality. And the fact that people are saying you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, became how he thought about himself. And the teachers or the influences in his life that started to say, you're good, you're good, you're good, he started to feel better about himself. And that's really, really important. And I would actually argue, because I'm actually just finishing up my Reiki certification, and having one of the gifts that Kieran left me, or actually made me realize through what's happened in my spirituality, is a lot of, I believe, and it's just my take, but I actually believe that a lot of mental health issues are also energy imbalances in the soul. So through energy healing and that sort of thing, and I know it's kind of new, so I'm not going to go too far onto that, but I'm starting to realize that with energy healing, that actually you can correct that. I had a patient a couple of days ago who to you might look schizophrenic, to the average person, and his parents had him formed, and he actually was one of my son's friends. And I actually looked at him very, very differently. And I just saw him as someone who had a bit of energy that needed some energy healing. And I know this is a whole new realm. Like Reiki is something that for some people is completely out there. But to me, I thought this is a very new, it's a new direction for some people, but I saw a completely different perspective now that I've looked into this different form of healing. And I thought, wow, what if I looked at my son like that? What if and if you want to call it, you know, positive, you know, however you want to interpret what that is, however you're comfortable. But for Kieran, I think the more positive people talked about him and talked with him, the more he changed his whole demeanor, the more confidence he had in himself. You want to call that psychotherapy? Awesome. I'm going to call it energy. Like it's all just how you perceive it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we are so susceptible to, the opinions of others. And, as we grow up, certainly as children, we pick up, a lot of limiting beliefs and the negativity, and it sort of adds and piles up, and then we get locked in that space. And once you're in that space, it's difficult and challenging to get beyond it. So it is really important. And, I always encourage people to, be very cognizant of your language, the language that you speak, whether that is to your children or to anyone around you, and even the language you speak to yourself, because we can be our own worst critics. But it is really important to really understand the power behind your words, right? Because they can really tear you down, but they can lift you up so beautifully as well. And I think we just focus on being lifted up, right? Yes,
right, absolutely. Because as soon as he got to high school and had that really positive influence there through the special needs teacher, all of a sudden, then he was starting to go up. So he went from only 2 classes a day that they would manage to all of a sudden full. By the time he was in grade 12, he was full classes all day. And he ended up just short of 2 credits. But to me, I don't care. Like, that was still amazing when you can only do 2 classes a day, how are you ever going to get 4 in a semester? But to end up with only 2 short after the first 2 years, only doing two per semester, whatever, he caught up. And, he did really, really well. And he was becoming quite, a charming, well, he was always charming, but, he was always, he became quite a charming young man who was positive and healthy and, a really a nice guy through all of the challenges, which to others might have been perceived as, less than desirable, shall we say. By the time he was looking up towards his future and, starting to think about what that might look like in the end.
Yeah.
But he still made a lot of mistakes and still, got into some trouble, along the way.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because there's a balance. I mean, most teens get into some kind of trouble here and there. So, right, it's trying to find that balance. Like, okay, so now what is it that is just the normal teenager, so to speak, right? Or, versus, the challenges, the issues that somebody is dealing with on a mental sense. So it's really hard, I think, to sometimes distinguish between what is just, hey, it's just a teenager, acting out or whatever. But, I think it's so key that, you had the support and that you were a great support structure for Kieran as well. And then you continue to be there for him on that journey. Because I can only imagine how difficult that would be for any parent to see that destruction, right? Within their child, and you want more from that for them, and you see them struggling, and that's such a challenge. So I think it's so important that you also acknowledge yourself in all of this, right? I mean, yes, there were these people who helped your son and who made him feel important and validated, but you also were part of that as well. I think we can tend to forget, our own role in those situations, right? So I think important to honor yourself there, Sharon.
Well, thank you. But I also think as parents, it's easier sometimes to give up and not keep fighting. I remember vividly when we were looking at a residential treatment center for him, I remember one sentence just ringing clear and said, no one is going to love him like you do. So putting him in a home, he's going to be with people who are there to work for the community or whatever, but they're not going to love him like you do. And I remember that being the distinct factor. Like, it would have been easier for me to let him go there than to keep him in my house. That's harder. That's much harder to stay and fight. But when that sentence just rang in my mind, I'm like, you're right. No one is going to love him like I do. That unconditional love that he was teaching me about how to love him. And, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Stays with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I know that you said that you believe, not that you believe, you have this inherent knowing that you were put on this earth to be Kieran's mom. So I would love for you to tell us a little bit more of, what that knowing feels like, and when did you realize that was, part of your big purpose?
Oh, wow. I don't know how to answer that right now. I just think that like there wasn't a day, there was hardly ever a day of his life that wasn't a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like somewhere along the line, someone knew, well, of course they know. Well, I don't know who they are. Whoever we want to decide
Yeah.
they are, that they were preparing me for the biggest upheaval, the biggest test, right? Which is the loss of a child.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way that we can get you to that depth of pain is to keep hitting you with challenge after challenge. You know, that old expression, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger.
Mm-hmm.
So I just felt that I remember vividly thinking, what more am I going to endure? You know, this police interaction, that charge, this, you know, fight with his brother, this interaction with the school, that situation. And I just kept pleading, like, what else? When does it get easier? You know, and you never think that it's going to get easier the day he dies. The challenge of parenting him might get easier, but then you're left with this incredible grief. And then to try and decide, okay, well, thank you for that part getting easier. But now what is my journey? Now, what am I to do with this? Because at 18, you know, part of what changed in him is that PCC, Peel Children's Center, stopped supporting him. And I don't want to say that that caused him to kind of get a little lost, but you know, he was moving in a trajectory that was positive. Mm-hmm. And they stopped the support because at 18, you don't have any more free mental health. And we have a problem with our healthcare system that mental health is not your physical health. It stops, and it's not covered by OHIP, and it's not considered, you know, and I thought, and that's when he started to drift. And he started to drift because he couldn't continue taking care of himself, and himself was not going to the doctor to get a pill for something. It was his mental health. And when we lost that, we lost a bit of his happiness, and then he sought happiness in drugs. Mm-hmm. And so about 21, he hung out with a friend who introduced him to heroin. And then the next thing you knew, 18 months later, even though he was clean for 90 days, but that's only because I put him in jail for a breach of his conditions. I threw him into jail as that tough mom, and I bailed him out of jail 90 days later because I was bringing him home for Thanksgiving, and he felt happy, but he went and got some guy who we know who he is that dealt him some dirty drugs that looked like heroin. We know he weighed it out. We saw the scale. We saw how much was left in his pocket, but it was 4 times a lethal dose of fentanyl, and what he thought was 0.1 gram of heroin. I had naloxone. I was a prepared mom of a drug addict. I had it at home. I found him. I gave him naloxone. I started CPR. You know, I did everything I could to save my son. Mm-hmm. But, you know, he essentially went there to make him feel happy. Opioids were used to treat depression in the 1950s. That's what they used. So it's not uncommon for them to seek out happiness through drugs. Why are we blaming the drug addicts for being like the junkies? They just want to be happy. Mm-hmm. The doctors will give them drugs to make them happy. They're just doing the same thing to themselves. Alcoholics, you know, drink to be happy or to seek out to numb themselves. It's no different. But somehow when the doctor gives it, it's okay. But when they do it to themselves, it's not, right? And so he sought out his happiness. He sought out to kind of be happier for his depression. And yet I believe that if PCC would have continued, which by the way, they now do as a result of some of their fundraising, up to 25. And if OHIP would do it, and if mental health was as much of a priority as other things in, you know, our mental health system, then maybe, you know, I realize I could never know, but maybe he wouldn't have gone down that path. So sorry, go ahead.
No, please finish. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, so I set out on the 2nd year of his death anniversary, well, actually his birthday, as a gift to him, to just, you know, start a nonprofit and just say, you know, I hear you, and I don't know if this will help, but I just thought, you know, when I say good families, I'm just like, people don't talk about what's going on in their family enough. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I was embarrassed to talk about my son's mental health problems. I was embarrassed to talk about his drug addiction because, you know, I look like a normal family, and I didn't want to speak up, and he didn't want anyone to know. He never told anybody because he was ashamed And I thought maybe if we talk about it, maybe it'll normalize mental health in the household. Maybe it'll normalize what they do to make themselves feel better. There's nothing wrong with what he did. He just wanted to feel better. He just wanted to feel better.
Yeah.
So I started the nonprofit, and I started it, and I wanted to try and support Peel Children's Center with all the money I've raised so far. I've donated to them, and I was a speaker at their Gala of Hope last November in his honor. I was the guest speaker because I just want people to get mental health support free. I want it to be free.
Yeah, I agree that there is certainly a lack of funding and awareness when it comes to mental health issues. And it is tragic that there's just a date, you reach a certain age and then you're taken off the system. And that help and that support should always be available until it's no longer needed. And that may not ever, have an end point, right, for some people. So it is tragic. And, to see that, your son was looking to feel better, and you're absolutely right. We can't look at that and say, what a terrible thing, a drug addict. No, they need help. They want to feel better. That's the vehicle that they have chosen. Maybe it's not the best vehicle, but that's what happened. And unfortunately, such a tragic ending. Of course, there's people who take drugs, they feel better, and they may eventually get off them. And your son didn't have that opportunity. And I think these conversations are so important. And we're going to take a break. I'm going to continue talking more about that. And some of the help that is available to people and who are struggling and who are in a situation like you were, Sharon, and who don't know where to go, where to reach out. And we'll talk more about your nonprofit organization as well, Good Families Don't, because you have been helping so many people now through the grieving process and helping to direct them into where to go. Where do you go from experiencing such a deep tragedy? More help, to hear when we come back after this break. Stay with us here on Sauga 960 AM. You're listening to The Mindset Mentor. Well, hello and welcome back to The Mindset Mentor on Sauga 960 AM. Today we are talking with a remarkable woman who has experienced the deepest depths of tragedy and pain. She lost her son to an accidental overdose and also dealt with years of mental health concerns, as he was a young child and in his teens. And they overcame that. And then the tragedy happened, and all hope, essentially seemed to be lost. And what I love about this story is that Sharon was able to take that tragedy and turn it into something so beautiful for others and a way to honor her son, Kieran, as well. So I want to talk about, Sharon, your nonprofit, Good Families Don't. And so, what that entails, the help that you're providing others. And then I also want to talk about the importance of being a donor, because that's a huge aspect of your son's, purpose, I think, in life, and the good that's come out of this tragedy. So let's start with the Good Families Don't.
Okay. Yeah. So Good Families Don't is a forum-based website. There's like 6 different categories of conversation where you log in and you can, so there's the early years, there's anxiety and depression, there's, oh my gosh, I think there's one, I can't remember all of the categories off the top of my head. Oh my goodness. But anyway, there's different categories based on where you feel you fit in the conversation, and you go in and you kind of tell your story, and you can make up a handle or whatever. You just basically register a Gmail account. Some of them are there, like a mom, I forget, like a Big Shoulders mom. I forget, there's a couple users in there and they just go tell their story. Some people are very comfortable being open about their challenges. Some people, and it's their real name. Other people have created pseudo accounts, but I think you want to go in there and normalize. I know there's one that's about the law and like navigating the judicial system, because I know a lot of parents, when their kids get into trouble with the law, you don't actually know that there's a duty counsel at the courthouse, that you don't necessarily have to get a lawyer right away. You can get some advice. There's diversion available for you, so that instead of like pleading out and getting into the juvenile system, you can actually ask for diversion. Diversion would
Mm-hmm.
be like community service. And again, you don't have to get a lawyer. You can actually talk to duty counsel. You can get, so as long as the crime or whatever they've done is fairly simple and they're not like gun charges or serious drug charges, you can actually get into diversion right away. So I give some advice in there. I put a couple of seeded blogs and or stories in there, but I want people talking, and I want them to feel normal about talking. Or the early years, like what does mental health in a young child look like? I talk about the bully because my son was a bully, and I know we do a lot to help the victim, but my philosophy is, why don't you figure out why the bully is bullying? Because if you actually treated the bully, in my opinion, then bullying would go away, instead of always making, and I'm not saying the victim doesn't need help. I'm just saying if we also included, and not instead of, but and included treatment for the bully, then we could actually probably minimize what's going on there. And then maybe that child, because I know my son, he always felt unsafe. So he always wanted to either be preemptive or, preparing, because he was worried someone was always going to hurt him first.
Yeah.
Anyway, it has a whole different, 6 different categories. You just go in there, you tell your story, and then other people would just talk about it. And it just normalizes the conversation about mental health.
Yeah, and I think it's so nice to be able to have that outlet for somebody to express what they're feeling and what they're going through, and to see that others are also going through the same thing. Because oftentimes you're going to feel that it's just you're going through this all alone, no one else understands. So it's really nice to have a forum where people can communicate in a safe environment.
Yes.
And feel heard, and know that help is available, and to have the option to see what is out there. Because as you say, a lot of people don't understand, the value there. And I love your belief with the bully. I am in 100% agreement that if we can just try to understand some of the concerns and the issues that are going on here, we can really help that bullying behavior, and so that we can stop it. Because I feel sometimes that it's more prevalent than ever, and it seems to be getting worse than better.
Yes.
So I think we really need to refocus and regroup, on that aspect.
Now, in some cases, I do acknowledge that the bullying can be something that's manifesting at home. I know they often say bad parenting. I get that there are situations where that is absolutely what's going on. There might be an aggressive parental situation. In my case, that wasn't the case. So but each case should be looked at on its own merit, and not just assume that it's all bad parenting. And if that parent would just be more strict with that kid, that's not always what's going on. Because again, I had 2 children, and I had one that was just, navigating through life in a more linear, fashion. And then I had Sharon. So that's something that's important. And then outside of the forums, because you have to create an account, I actually blog a lot of stuff that just so people can see this is my life. And, I'm a senior executive in a technology firm. You would think that I look, again, like a normal family or, good family. And I use that word loosely. I'm just saying whatever good looks like to you, whatever healthy looks like to you, normal looks like to you. But I still had a lot of these challenges. I was involved with the law. My son was involved. I had lawyers and stuff like that. I was in court, and, we had drugs, and yet, you would say that I looked fairly average, at normal to most. You wouldn't think that that's what was going on. So I wanted people to feel it's not you. You didn't fail as a parent if your child is struggling with mental illness, or your child is struggling with the law, or we do the best we can. There's no manual on how to do this. You can still feel that you're doing a great job and still have challenges with your children.
Yeah, absolutely. So help available at goodfamilies.com. Is that the site?
Goodfamiliesdon't.com.
Sorry, goodfamiliesdon't.com. Information there. Absolutely. So I'd love to get into the donor aspect and the importance of donorship, and your incredible story, such a remarkable story of finding the recipient of your son's heart. So tell us how that all started.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if you're aware, but you're able to communicate with the recipients of the organs that you've donated, but only through this very controlled and redacted communication system. You send a letter to the Gift of Life people. They review it, make sure you didn't say anything that identified who you were. They then send the letter on to the recipient. And if the recipient wants to write back, it comes back through these channels. So I think, and you wait 6 months until after the recipients have received all of the until everything is okay. So we donated 4 Kieran's heart, the kidneys, and the liver. And so after 6 months, I wrote letters to all 4 of them. And within right away, I got letters back from Kieran's heart recipient. That was the first one that I got back. And I have to say, it's a very, very emotional and I don't know, surreal experience to get letters back and see, the living person that your child's heart is in. So we went back and forth with letters. I got letters from 3 of the 4 recipients. I think there's one, either the liver or one of the kidneys that I didn't hear back from. And that's fine. I understand that they appreciate that someone had to die in order for them to live. And that's really, really difficult to understand.
Mm-hmm.
But the heart and I, we started going back with letters. And I think by the time it had been a year, I remember sending him a letter saying, "Happy rebirth day" at a year. And he was very emotional. He wrote back that it took him a month to open the letter because he, again, knew it had been a year, and it was very, very difficult. But when finally, I think it was Christmas Day, 2018. And I don't know, I just had this urge to just break all the rules. And I went on Reddit and I put a post on there on Christmas Day saying I was looking for my son's heart. And I had enough about his information. I knew his brother had died of a heart disease, and I knew he had 2 children, and I knew he was my age. And I just said, I just put it out to the universe and said, I want to find him. And so the story went viral. I think it got to like 25,000 upvotes or something in a day or 2. It was going berserk.
Wow.
And next thing you know, I was getting inboxed by news stories, and they wanted to know, could we cover the story? And I went down to CBC and did a radio spot on the 28th of December. And about a couple of days later, I'm getting goosebumps. I got a message, and there was a couple of questions. I said, if it's him, this is how I'll know it's him. So ask him these questions.
Yeah.
And they said he answered them right. So,
wow.
Yeah. So they gave him they gave him my information, and I said, well, he'll contact you when he's ready. So I waited. And then on Valentine's Day, on February 14th, he sent me a happy Valentine's Day from the both of us. And
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we started down this beautiful communication. He gave me his phone number. He gave me his email address, obviously, because he emailed me. And then we communicated through Instagram and Facebook. And we've gone back and forth in wanting to meet, but we both have this like apprehension. And I think I just came out on my Facebook recently. Was it my birthday? April, I think. I actually opened up the world to who this wonderful man is. Like, we've been communicating privately, but
right.
And he would always comment. I would say something, I'd post something, and he'd always say the most beautiful thing. Your Kieran's heart is, is beating on, or he'd say the most beautiful thing, and no one would know that was him. And so finally I said, I want to introduce you to this beautiful soul who has my son's heart. And and so he's out west right now. He's just kind of taking a break because obviously he's an actor, and he's not able to work right now. So, but yes, I found him, and I have such great joy in watching him live his life and see him with his children. And it brings me such great joy to know that he's alive and well, because my son was, we were able to donate those organs. And I can't express how grateful I am to see that, and to see that someone else like me is children are seeing their dad alive because of that organ donation. There's no greater joy.
Wow. I love that story. And I'd love to talk about some of the similarities now that the recipient has, things that your son loved. And you were talking about how the recipient had all these great sayings. Well, I wrote one of them down because I just thought it was just so beautiful. And he said, you'll be happy to know that that he was man enough to receive such a big heart. Like, whoa, right? That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Shows you the joy and the gratitude and appreciation, right? Mm-hmm.
Well, the preamble to that is, I said that if Kieran's love would be judged by the size of his heart, it wouldn't fit in anybody. His love, was that the right thing? The size of his heart could be judged by how much he loved. It wouldn't fit in anybody. So he answered and said, it fits here. It fits here. So I can't, of course you don't have any say in who gets the recipients, and you wonder, if this person is going to, if they got it for the wrong reasons and they're going to continue to, but for him to write back there, like he says the most beautiful things. And I know that the heart is in the right place. Literally, figuratively, spiritually, it's just been bestowed into this beautiful vessel that's going to continue. And he says, I'm going to honor this, and I'm going to take Kieran's heart, and I'm going to take it on, I know it's where it belongs. And, like out of tragedy, you can find this joy in knowing that he's going to take it from here, Mom. Like Vince is going to take it from here, and that's just such a beautiful thing to know that. But yes, you asked about some similarities. So when he first got the heart, he said that, first of all, he started Kieran was an avid gardener. He'd taken my whole backyard, went from flowers and shrubs to vegetables and fruits. And so now every year, like I still have Kieran's raspberries growing insanely. I had to make so many raspberries and raspberry jam and raspberry dessert and raspberry this. And so he said that he'd taken up gardening to the point where in one of his letters, his son said, Dad, like, have you taken up a green thumb? Like, and it's because there was this transference. He also said that he has anxiety now where he didn't have anxiety before. And that was something that Kieran had a lot of. He also told me in one of his letters that once he saw my picture, he said that he'd had a dream about some woman while he was in the hospital looking over him. And he said when he saw my picture that it was me.
Wow.
So I know there's like, whoa. The stuff that you don't really think is that really happening. But I have read about a lot of the transference, like the cells have DNA, and there's a lot of stuff that
memory.
Memory, absolutely. So, I mean, I could show you the letters where it's just unbelievable.
And there was something that you had said to me that always, stuck in my mind as well, is that this man had said to you that he has an uncontrollable urge to call you Mom.
Yes.
And you're the same age, right?
Yes. And sometimes we talk about that, and he's like, or like we'll talk on, we're talking on Instagram and something like that, and he'll say that. And there's actually this really weird love that we have for each other. I haven't met him. He's a beautiful man. Like when I see he's out in nature and he's appreciating nature, and he's just, with his children, and you think, yeah, we're good. But we're talking sometimes, and I just want to, I'll say things like love from this end. Like I don't say I love you. I don't know that man, but I just know there's this love. Like it's this really beautiful place of love, this unconditional. I know you're taking care of my son's heart. And they really should change this rule that you can't communicate, because if both parties want to and they want to share this incredible gift that you've got, I mean, why not? Why not? I get it. Like check in at 6 months, check in at a year, check in at 18 months. And if they still want to, why are you standing in the way? Because this is beautiful. This is a beautiful experience to be able to share with this wonderful man. And I get it. We're still not, I know for me, I want a stethoscope and I want to put it to his chest and I want to hear my son's heart beating in him. I know I want to do that, but when he's ready, when he's ready.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, unfortunately we're out of time. So I just want to ask, if somebody wants to be a donor, where can they go? What can they do? How does it work?
Oh, it's pretty easy. There's you can sign the back of your, I think it's your driver's license.
Yeah.
But there's actually online, you can go online now and you can actually do it online so that they have a record of it. And just in case you don't sign the back of your card, but what difference does it make once you're gone? Right. And if you're ever in this situation where you can impart this on somebody else, it's to save 4 lives. I feel like my son's a hero, and and I take such great pride in knowing that out of a tragedy you can help others.
Yes. And I want to acknowledge you for the work that you have been doing and continue to do. Now it's only a short, coming up to 3 years, the 3-year anniversary of your son's death. And you have been able to rise above it in such a beautiful way. Obviously that deep pain is always going to be with you. But you have been able to find that beautiful light in the deep, dark moments and helping other people. So congratulations and kudos to you for being the person that you are and being the fighter and continuing the fight and really helping to shed the light on mental health awareness, always important, and also the other available tools to other people. So again, if you would like more information, goodfamiliesdon't.com.
Yes.
And Sharon, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story and being brave and vulnerable to put it out there.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, everyone. And that's a wrap for today's show on the Mindset Mentor. Make sure you tune in next Saturday at 11 a.m. and get your mindset workout. Stay with us. We'll be back here on Sauga 960 a.m.